They're saying that President Truman has no knowledge of any secret project by this government that would give substance to the existence of such objects. Ross also said that both the Air Force and the Navy deny that such objects exist.
Hey, I'm Chelsea, and I'm the battle cry of 1,000 angry Branch Davidians.
And hey, what's up? My name is Noelle, and I am the ghost of Bill Cooper.
And we have a podcast called Freaky Geeks,
where you can hear us scream about birds not being real.
And Stan Lee being the real-life inspiration for the little girl backwards crab walking down the stairs in The Exorcist.
Find us on all social media and listen to episodes anywhere podcasts are heard.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be
the owner of a comic book store.
Trust me, true believer. Well, Jagger and me, we had a running contest to see who had the most comic books in the world.
Whatever, my escape was comic books.
Net profit to me, negative $59.
I love the comics because of the brightness displayed by the fellows who drew them. They remain with me always. And when comic books first came into being, it drew me to them.
Tales from the Comic Shop.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tales from the Comic Shop. We got a little bit of a different thing we're doing along this week. We have an interview with one James Lamb. James, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good, man. How are you?
Doing all right, man. Thanks for joining us. So James is here to talk about our last part of our collecting series and how to collect, and we're talking about speculation. And we had James on because James is someone who started out as a speculator, did quite well with it, and has moved on to bigger and better things with that. So James, why don't we start by telling everybody kind of what it is you're doing and what this has led you to, and then we'll go back through and talk about how you got here.
Yeah, sure. Ending first, or current day first.
That's right.
About, I don't know, I want to say 4 months ago, during the middle of this pandemic, when I found myself with enough time, an idea that had been brewing for a couple of years came to fruition. Stars aligned, everything worked out well. So ended up with a partner of mine, Jonathan Hall. We ended up starting Hive Comics. And to date, we've put out, I think we've got 5 pre-sales that we've done so far for books. And we have about 10 or 12 more slated for this year.
And by putting out books, define what you're talking about there, because you guys are doing like exclusive covers and things through existing publishers, right?
Yeah, so we've been finding these properties that we're really interested in, either on a personal level or a speculation level, or just a fan of the writers or the publishers themselves. And we've been contacting artists that we really appreciate their work and that we've grown to love, and have been teaming them up underneath the umbrella of Hive Comics and doing exclusive limited print run variants of comic books.
So you went from a speculator to legit comic dealer pretty quick.
Pretty quick, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. We'll go back to the intro. When did you start? Because I know comics wasn't really, I know unlike a lot of people, it wasn't really a thing growing up for you or anything like that. When did you get into comic books? When did you buy your first one? So
I grew up around it, and I read titles when I was younger that were age inappropriate. Like I started off by reading Preacher and 100 Bullet and books like that.
Okay.
But I definitely fell out of comics when my early teens, maybe even 11 or 12. I kind of fell out of comics.
So you're reading Preacher at what, 8?
Yeah, right around there. Yeah.
Yeah, that had to. I mean, I got to imagine at least 40% of that went completely over your head.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I've reread it since, and I appreciate that book way, way more than I used to.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think, God, first comic I bought myself. I guess it was a short box of books. Oh, it was Punisher, the Punisher Max series.
Okay.
What was that one?
Was it Garth Ennis series?
Yes, the Ennis series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that was the first books I bought. And it wasn't, obviously it wasn't a book. It was an entire run. But yeah, that's kind of what got me back into it.
Okay. And then I know from there, we met you because you'd come into the store. And I know Charles is the one who runs our store for everyone listening. And he kind of dealt with you a little bit more than I did. But I guess Charles was telling me yesterday that you actually got a hold of us through my store when I had my store out in Tooele. Is that right?
Yeah. So my brother had been going out to your store, and I had bought, and I had been buying comics at that point for maybe up to a year, and had gotten some really cool books together, and kind of needed the cash. And so I was talking to my brother about it. And he's like, dude, take it over by the nerd store and talk to them. And I didn't want to make the trip out to Tooele. So he so politely informed me that you guys had a location at Valley Fair Mall. And I had not stepped foot in that mall in years. So I went in there, and I think that was the first time I talked to Charles, was trying to sell him some books.
Yeah. And you got to see the Shark version very first.
Yeah. I sold him an ASM 300 for probably cheaper than I should have, but no, he gave me honestly, he gave me a good deal, but to be honest with you, I wasn't paying attention to the fact. I was new enough into it. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that there was a certain Venom movie coming out about 4 months later.
Oh, sure. So so now we all know the time frame for when this happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what got you into then, that sounds like someone kind of getting out of it. What got you into the running speculation and interested in that portion of things? And how did you start that?
Well, honestly, it was, so I needed the cash, but what I ended up doing with a lot of it was, I did reinvest a good chunk of it. I bought some books that I'd wanted. I went and bought me a 9.6 graded, 100 Bullets issue 1,
Nice.
Just because I wanted one.
Sure.
So, and things like that. And that kind of, I guess, stoked the fire in the, hey, you know what? I can actually do this. I can buy some of these books. I can sell them, books that I don't have a love affair with. I can sell them, make a bit of a profit on it. And if I do it enough, I can start collecting up and buying up some of these books that I've wanted for years that haven't been able to, or books that have gone up in value enough that they were outside of what I could pay for with a 9-to-5 job.
Sure. And so I know at that point, is that at kind of the point when you developed the relationship with Charles and started to kind of work with him? Because one of the things we had covered, when we were talking about tips for people if they want to get into both investing and speculating, is to have a relationship with your local comic shop and your local comic shop owner.
Oh, absolutely.
And how valuable that is. So can you talk about kind of developing that relationship both with Charles, and I know you have relationships with the other shops in the area as well, and kind of how you use those relationships and what you give back to them to make it worth it for all parties?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I'll say that is, I've got to say, if you're trying to do speculation and you're trying to do it the right way, that is absolutely 100% the most important thing you can do, because your LCS can stay on top of those trends. If you build that relationship with them, they'll tell you what books are coming months ahead of time, which cuts down on some of the legwork, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, the legwork that's involved in this. But it certainly helps on every aspect of collecting or speculating, having that good, solid core relationship. But I definitely, it was kind of funny. Charles will tell you that first time I walked in there and I had all these books, he saw somebody who was just trying to sell some books, and then I think it was that second or third time I went in, I'd snagged up a few books that had, were selling for a little bit more. And I went and talked to him, and he pegged me as a speculator at that point. And he's like, well, kind of took me under his wing and said, listen, like, the way you're doing this isn't right. Because I think I walked in there and I was trying to buy 10 copies of something,
Sure.
And Charles, being a wise comic shop owner, did the same thing that almost every comic shop owner would do, and immediately hopped on eBay and was like, okay, something's going on with this book.
Sure.
And so once he saw that, he's like, okay, now hold on a minute, and kind of took me under his wing and said, if you ever want to buy a lot of books, and beforehand that it's coming out, let us know. We'll order you as many as you want, and that was my introduction to FOC, to final order cutoff. That was my introduction to really to buying in bulk, because that kind of laid a seed in my head that was like, that he's right. If I start paying attention to these retailer magazines, the previews magazine, and see something that piques my interest or that I think's got a good chance, I can let him know way ahead of time. And instead of paying $10 in the secondary market, trying to flip it for 20 weeks later, I can buy it at $4 and sell it at the $15 mark and cut everyone off. Cut everyone off.
Yeah, well, you have it quick. You have quantities right there. I mean, you can have it listed hours before anyone else can because they're out still hunting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so let's define for those who don't know kind of what FOC is. So the way that comic book distribution works is these books are printed to order. So we, as comic shops, we have to order all these books months in advance. When he says FOC, that's final order cutoff. And what that is our last chance to modify orders, our last chance to say, okay, the demand for this is a little higher than we expected now that we're closer, or a little lower than we expected, whatever. And so we can make adjustments on that point to get more in. And that's kind of the last ditch if you want to get us in. And the reason that, Charles would tell somebody coming in and buying 10 issues of a book, a lot of people are like, well, you're a comic shop, your job is to sell books. But the problem is, if you come in and buy 10 issues of a book, a lot of times they're number one issues, a lot of times or they're a specific cover or those kind of things. That stops the ability for a reader to get the number one and continue through. So from a shop, our job is always, and our goal is always to get more readers involved. But even beyond that, just from a dollar cent standpoint, if someone's going to buy numbers 1 through, perpetuity, that's a more valuable purchase to us than even 10 copies of number 1. And I'm sure that's what Charles explained to you, but to talk to the people kind of wondering that be listening, why it is that a shop doesn't want that to happen, that would be it. So you touched a little bit on the amount of work involved in doing this. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on kind of what that means, and then also what you're looking for when you say you're looking at stuff, before it comes out? How do you go about picking a winner, and how much learning curve was there to trying to figure out how to pick winners instead of losers?
Well, if you look at the amount of long boxes I've got sitting with books that aren't really worth much, I would say that the learning curve's still there. But you can't always pick winners. I think that's part of it. You have to play within your means. If you're getting into speculating, the last thing you want is one bad speculation to take you out of it.
Yeah. Don't play with money you don't have. It's the same rule of gambling. If you're going to go play slots, you don't play with money you don't have.
Exactly, and that's what it is. I mean, I've read. What I like to do is my first step in this is really that previews magazine, and it's talking to LCS owners, and it's hanging out at the shop and bullshitting with people and finding out what's going on, but that retail magazine and their website is invaluable for stuff like that, because I fly by my heart. Like, I'll read just a short little multiple paragraph synopsis on a new series that's starting in issue 1. I pay a lot of attention to issue 1s because it's a guaranteed first appearance. Yeah,
generally, other than the big two.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're talking about smaller publishers, which I know most of what you did was smaller publisher.
Yeah, up to this point, a lot of it has been. But yeah, we I'll read those, and if the story to me screams movie or TV, right? And I'm not saying I'm speculating on movie or TV, but just I guess what I mean by that is that it has a broader audience than just somebody who knows comics. Sure. Not somebody who's just into superheroes, not somebody who's just into certain things, but like the type of story that might have a more mass appeal. Those are ones that pique my interest. Those are ones that I look at. And then at that point, I look at, okay, who's the writer? The story sounds great, but who's the writer? Okay, cool. What interior artists did they get, and what cover artists are they using?
And you're looking for people generally that have kind of a rising star, right? Not necessarily someone who's already a real well-known commodity, but someone who's on their way up.
Yeah. It's those people that have a moderate but good track history. Not a 20-year track history in the industry of producing winners as far as long run comic series and stuff like that. But the people that, the few books they put out before were well liked, sold decent, books like that. That's more what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so an example of that, we do a little bit. I mean, we don't do speculation, obviously, as a store, but we have done a lot of our own exclusive covers. And there's an element to that when you're having that discussion about whether to do an exclusive cover, you're kind of projecting whether this book's going to be good, well received enough that people are going to want it. And I think one that we did that was an example of what you're talking about was the Aftershock book, Baby Teeth, because at that time, Donnie Cates had just released God Country. He had a couple of decent books. He kind of was growing with every book he put out. I think when we agreed to that, he hadn't gotten any of his Marvel contracts. I think that occurred right before it released, if I recall.
Yeah.
But that's one that did pretty well for us for a small independent title. And a lot of it was the fact that it had Donnie Cates' name attached to it. And he was kind of an up-and-comer, and people wanted to see what he was doing.
Exactly. And that's, a good one for me was Farmhand. That from a speculator standpoint, that book was great to me. I still have stashed, I don't know how many San Diego copies of that, maybe 10.
That did well for you. That did real well for you.
And I'd probably still have 10 or so of the regular issue one, because that's a book that I still think 5 years down the road's got really good staying power.
I actually agree with you, especially now that it's had the AMC announcement.
Yeah, exactly. And you could see that one coming from a mile away. You could see.
I actually just found my. Rob's one of those guys that you talk about that has a track record, but he's very selective with his projects.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't do a ton of volume, but he does great work. I actually found my my little ash can that I got at the Image Expo. It's hidden away in a long box the other day. I forgot I had for that Farmhand. Kind of went, oh wow, cool, that's worth money, but I'm not selling it because I like it. So to give people an idea, obviously you go in and you buy, say, 30 copies of something that ends up being a bit of a bust. You can be out, $100 on that pretty easily.
Yeah.
Flip aside that though, say something like Farmhand. How much do you think you had made on a deal like that? Like, what was the number that you were looking at?
I think after selling the San Diego copies, I did sell. I think I'm up on that book. I'm probably up $1,200 just on that title. But that's also, I've got liquidity in what I currently have in that short box. I've got books that right now I could sell them. If I paired those two up together, the San Diego and the regular copy, I'm selling them I could sell them at $45, $50 all day. So I've got $500 in books in easy sell. Graded and signed, we're talking even more. But those are books, like I said, I think they've got a future. I don't think they have a chew type future, but I think that book's one of those ones that another year or two down the road, people are really going to appreciate it more. And that issue one's going to be gold.
Yeah, I think Walking Dead kind of it was really great in a lot of ways, but it almost toxified people because now they all expect that if you buy something at $3 and you don't make $1,200 off it, you didn't do well.
Yeah.
Farmhand's probably not going to be a Walking Dead, even though it's got that AMC deal, but it doesn't need to be a real successful purchase.
No, not at all. No.
Go from there. Then I know you talked about San Diego, you talked about cons a little bit. So for those who don't know, one of the things I think really when I got to know you was doing cons. It's when we would meet up and go to San Diego Comic-Con or Emerald City or those kind of things. As retailers, we're guaranteed entrance to those things. And because you had such a good relationship with us, and frankly, because you're willing to go to the cons and work for free for us, because of those things, we kind of made an agreement with you. So you come along, help split some of the travel expenses, and you do some work for us and we throw you a few bones as far as spec opportunities, and we kind of help each other out, partner on that stuff. Talk about that a little bit and talk about how that kind of helped build other relationships that led you to where you are now.
Yeah. So I'll talk about lessons learned too. I think there's some solid lessons learned from going to cons. Cause it's a rapid microcosm of what speculating is. It's speculating very quickly.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if it was like lack of anything to do that week or how it came about. But I remember you guys needing somebody to go with to San Diego. You needed a fourth. You guys always go, you and Charles and two others. And some reason or another, like a month or so before, I happened to mention to Charles, I'm like, hey, I wouldn't mind going to one of those one day, And he's like, well, hell, go to this one. So I ended up going to that first one. Total shell shock. Never been to a big convention before.
You can't prepare for it. There's no story. There's no way people could tell you, especially the way we do it. I mean, for those who have or have not been for San Diego Comic-Con, I think even people that have gone every year don't know how many different experiences are happening at one time inside that building. And how much different others there may be having to their experience than you. And if you're just going to, go to some panels and check out some cosplay, it's not the same. But doing it the way we do it, when you really want to, we're there to make money. So we're there to get things that we can resell and that we can bring back with us that are hard to get. And it's a fight. I mean, it's really, sometimes literally. Sometimes it's a literal fight, a physical one. That's happened as well. So it's something you really have to know what you're doing. Huge learning curve. Yeah, shell shock is a good way to put it, because it feels a little bit like going into a soft war, like a war zone where you're not really, in danger, but there's some stuff about to go down at every moment.
Maybe that's why you guys invited me.
That's exactly.
He was in the military. He can handle San Diego Comic-Con.
No, dude. Honestly, one of the things we have talks all the time about who we're going to invite with us, and the very first thing we think of when we think of a name is, can they handle it? I mean, that's literally the very first thing we ask each other. And for when we say handle it, we mean from two aspects. Number one, if things aren't going well, can you literally push yourself in somebody's way, or can you get right in someone's face that's coming after you and back them down? And then the number two, can you sleep in a sidewalk for 5 days and walk 20 miles a day and still keep your spirits high and not turn into a jerk? And those are the two elements that you got to handle.
Yeah, see, and I think I was one of those messed up individuals that when you guys told me about how you guys do San Diego, I was like, oh, that all sounds fun. We're going to sleep out underneath the stars for 4 nights. That's awesome.
One of the rare ones. Yeah. Yeah, one of the ones who, when we tell you we hope we're lucky enough to get the concrete, you didn't think that we were crazy.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely say though, my choice of footwear that first year was not great. I definitely by end of day 2, I had blisters that covered the bottom of both my feet. Yeah. Oh man, that was brutal.
But you earn it, man. For those who think that San Diego Comic-Con exclusives are overpriced, go and try and get them one year. You'll change your mind real fast.
Oh yeah. By year 2, I'm looking at tables with, $40 books selling for $15 and just looking at these lines and stuff like that. Just like, you know what? No, that one's not worth it. That one, I know I can sell it tonight, but it's not worth it. But no, I think what I was saying, like from a speculation standpoint, the reason conventions are like a microcosm, kind of expand on that, is it's a rare instance where, because all speculating relies on supply and demand. It's everything. I mean, that's the basic of business anywhere, but especially in the collectibles market. Conventions are one of those few places where demand is high, but supply, not just strictly because of numbers, but because of ability to get the books. Supply is so limited because you have people that want a book from that show or want 5 books from that show, but they don't have the means or the want or the time to spend thousands of dollars to travel, stay in hotels and tickets. They don't want to go through the hassle of running through the convention center, getting yelled at by staff to be the first in line or the first 100 in line to get those books,
Yeah.
Or they can't take the time off of work because it's a huge time commitment. Yeah.
Sure. Well, and the overheads are a lot higher than people understand. Like you have to really get, even if you're making 4 or 5 times on everything you buy, which is only what you make on the better stuff. Even then you have to do serious volumes to be able to pay your overheads and have any room for any sort of profit, because overheads in that area it's not low, even when you do it the way we do it.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, God, even breakfast, lunches, and dinners around convention times in convention cities. I mean, you're hundreds and hundreds of dollars to keep yourself fed and watered.
We paid close to $200 just for parking.
Yeah, everything's insanely expensive. So you have to be, at conventions especially, you have to be very careful with your time. You have to make it worth your time to be there, and you have to understand that, like, you're sitting around for 2 hours. That's money lost or opportunity lost. So you got to stay motivated and keep working through them for sure.
I think the idea of going in and getting exclusives and flipping them, I think that's fairly well known, and I think that's pretty obvious way to capitalize on conventions. But where I think that you had a little bit different, and I think smarter idea than most, and it's something that we do as well, is the networking aspect of conventions.
Oh yeah.
I think that's more valuable than the flipping. I mean, the flipping pays your way and it's nice, but there's nowhere near the value you can get from if you network properly. So do you want to touch on that a little bit and how you kind of built? Because I'm assuming that was a big part of building Hive, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's, the speculating and flipping while you're at a convention, it covers the expenses. But the long-term payout is definitely going to some of these panels where Marvel or Image, these creators and writers and artists are talking about projects they're working on, because you get to see firsthand, or even talking to them on the convention floor, or lunches or dinners with them, which you guys have introduced me to so many writers and artists that way, but it's getting to hear about the projects they have coming up that they're truly passionate about. Because you look at, like we were saying with Donnie Cates, the reason his indie books were so good, and the reason his Marvel is so good, is because he's been so passionate about comics and these stories he's wanted to tell for such a long time, and it's when you get to talk to these creators firsthand about projects they have coming up, and things before anybody else does, which is great, but you also get to know and get to see how passionate they are about these projects. Because if you have a writer's full attention and full passion behind a project, people are going to read it because it's going to be well written. And if it's a low print run first issue on a book that's like that, from somebody who's that passionate about the project, forget about it. It's just a matter of time before it's a good spec book. Sitting in Diamond retailer luncheons and like I said, panels, and just talking to these guys, but I think the big thing is you can't be timid. And I think that's something that you guys helped me out with a lot with this, is like I admire a lot of these artists and writers, but you can't be afraid to ask them questions. You can't be afraid to have that conversation. I see too many times where people they'll walk up to an artist or writer and, to get a signature on a book and stuff like that. And they'll sit there and go, "I'm such a huge fan of yours. Thank you for everything you do." And then that's it. And it's like, are you not curious what they're doing now? You don't want to have,
and they want to talk about what they're doing now, especially if they have a passion for it.
Yeah.
Like, they want to tell you what they have coming up. And you definitely can tell, and not to take anything away from the people who have been around and done it for a while, but there is something different about the hungry creator, the guy that's on the cusp, the guy that's right there. He can see that his dream of doing comics full time for a living is sitting right in front of him, and he's just not there yet, and he's ready to make that final push. Versus a creator that's been in it for a long time, that's comfortable, that they can still put out great work once they hit that point. But there's just something different about the way that they handle things and the type of things they put out in those two modes, I think.
Absolutely. And that's something we've carried over into Hive with the books we've chosen to work with, the publishers we've chosen to work with, and even the cover artists we've chosen to work with. It's been people that we'll toss a cover artist a few ideas and say, "Hey, we've got these 3 books that are coming out. Is there anything you're super stoked on?" Like we were talking to John Jang about doing a cover for an Image book for us. And his exact response was, "Oh my God, I've never done an Image book, and it's always been my dream to do one."
Awesome. Yeah.
We had a hire for stuff like that. We had
a similar response with the Image book that we did, the Dead Rabbit book. When we reached out on that one too, the artist on that one was a very similar response. He was like, "Hey, I've never worked for Image, but I wouldn't say it was quite that fantastic." He's like, "Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of projects thrown my way, but the opportunity to work for Image, I'm probably going to put you guys up on the list a little bit."
Yeah, and look at the work he gave you guys. You know what I mean? I mean, it was absolutely beautiful, beautiful cover.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, it was fantastic.
But yeah, fostering and making those relationships and fostering those relationships that you can through these artists and writers is certainly something that carries through. It's helped me out more than most with Hive, but it's certainly something that can help the average speculator or even collector. I mean, a lot of times,
certainly if you want to use this as a springboard, because I think a lot of guys that start as speculators, what they really want to be is a shop owner, and they just don't have the either knowledge or means or ability yet to get to that point. And I think if you can get in the room with other shop owners as you've been able to, and with other creators as you've been able to, and I mean, you've been in the professional rooms that you get in if you're a shop, right? You've been in those meetings and you've been in those rooms, seen how those things are done. And I think right now, for those who don't know, you've run a business, and you had your business before you met us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had my tattoo shop, which has been my business for 6.5 years now.
Sure.
But yeah,
then.
I think we're about, I want to say I was 2 years into my first tattoo shop when I first met you guys.
Yeah, but now so you obviously knew how to run a business, but being in those rooms, I think right now you could go in and open a comic shop, and there'd be a learning curve still, but it would be nothing like what it would be had, say, right out of opening a tattoo shop, you had tried to open a comic shop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that knowledge and experience of being around other comic book retailers certainly helped with Hive. It gave me that's honestly what put the idea in my head years ago, is seeing these guys that had done similar, not necessarily brick and mortar stores, but had done online retail sales of comic books. But I've never wanted to do it in a way where I took away from LCSs. I feel like that's damaging to the industry as a whole. So my thought was always the best way to do it is produce my own things, not necessarily take away from LCSs. Not saying there isn't a place for online retail, for online comic book shops, because there certainly is plenty of people across this country that are not within 100 miles of a comic book shop, and they should be readers too. They should be allowed to read. But I don't want to add to that.
Well, and you're also getting in that point into a whole nother. I think finding your niche is a very important thing if you're going to be smart at any business. Yeah. And your niche is never going to be fulfilling 5,000 or 6,000 copies of a Batman book. Like for $1 or $2 an issue. Like you just don't have the means or the energy or the capital or any of those things to compete with like a Mile High on something like that, or a Midtown or something. It's just not feasible.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want the grind. I mean, there's a grind to selling limited run books, but I would rather sell out of a series in 2 days than spend 2 months trying to market it and sell it.
Absolutely.
And that's one series. I mean, LCSs have to market and help push, damn near 100 different titles. It seems like every 2 weeks, and that's the energy and the side of it that doesn't appeal to me enough for that to be a thing in my near future. I don't think so.
Sure. So I know that this whole thing's about speculating, and what you're doing now is a little different. But honestly, I think I always pictured when we were doing variants really heavy, I always pictured it as a form of speculating as well. I think it's I don't know if it technically follows the definitions, but for me, I think that the skill set's the same. It's really just taking the same thing and putting it in a different way. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's speculating. I think it's a more raw form, but it's definitely speculating, because you could take the world's best title and put a horrible cover artist on it, and it's not going to sell. So you have to do that same homework that you do when you're speculating every week to buy books on Wednesdays, or you're speculating months ahead to do to do bulk orders on books from your LCS. I mean, it's that same thing. You've got to stay months ahead. You've got to stay with the hot artists. But also on that, you have to foster relationships that you don't necessarily have to if you're a weekly speculator. If you're that guy who just goes in on a Wednesday to buy the hot book, which I do, I still do that to this day. It's not a primary means of finances for me, but I find it fun now, more so than I did before.
Sure. If you strike out, there's no stress.
Yeah.
I think I always thought that with doing covers too, there's a little bit of an art too, because you can have a great artist that doesn't match the theme of a book, So I think a lot of it too is about matching up an artist who's not only a great artist, but somebody who matches that attitude or the theme or the feel of that particular title.
Yeah. Yeah. We've tapped Stan Yak to do some covers for us. And not a lot of people are super familiar with him. There's some diehard guys that are, but he's done a lot of indie books and nothing really mainstream, like not much mainstream, but his work lends itself very well to some titles we have coming out. And it's one of those things that, it's not the hot artist that's going to sell. It's his ability to produce artwork that matches the interior of that book and what the story is about that is going to sell that book.
Yeah, and that's how guys get on the map, right? They get the combination of the right book, the right character. I mean, I remember not that long ago when no one knew who Art Germ was, and I saw a all new Wolverine that popped up that had this amazing cover of X-23, who's always been my favorite. And I just said, like, I have to have him. And that's when he got on my radar. And it seemed like right after that, he had 2 or 3 that hit up that were just the right character for him. And I think Marvel saw that and said, hey, we need to get this guy doing regular cover work.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, DC actually saw that and got him doing regular cover work for DC. And that's when he, all of a sudden blew up and he's everywhere.
Yeah. I think, it's the same as with finding, it can be anyways. It's the same with finding that writer that's had a decent track history, but a short one. It's if you can find an artist that, has a bunch of really good covers or really good interior art that they've done, even that are translatable to covers, but they don't necessarily have to be a big name. You just need to be able to put their work in front of enough people that they see it and go, oh my God, who is this guy? Or who is this guy?
I'll spend $10 or $15 on that.
Yeah. Because I think there's, as far as collectors go, and I don't know if you covered this in that previous episode or not, but I think there is multiple levels of collector. And I think over the past 5 or so years, I think you've seen this growth of the art collector or the person that will buy strictly based on a cover.
Absolutely. We briefly covered that. And one of the things that we were really emphatic about is that there's no wrong way to be a collector.
No.
I mean, if you enjoy it, I don't care if you ever open a book, like I'm a reader. I like talking to readers, but if you're enjoying it and you feel like you're getting your money out, then for whatever reason you're buying it is valid.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be the first one to say I barely read comic books. In fact, that's a joke between you and your brother.
Yeah,
you guys will start talking to me about X-Men or say something like that. I'm like, what's X-Men? And it's, obviously I know who they are, but I find myself reading more books now, just to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to speculation, more than I'm reading to enjoy. However, I will say that I have found quite a few indie titles that I've fallen in love with and I make sure I read, Now,
how often do you allow your fandom of those episodes to determine kind of where you go with some of your speculating and investing?
I try not to. I try to keep them separate unless I'm dead set on a book just being a hit. You know what I mean? But it certainly has led me astray before. And as much as I hate to say it, I think my lack of certain knowledge in comic books, I think my ability to not know everything ahead of time, gives me a different outlook and different view on speculating, where I can separate myself from it enough that I'm not like, these next 3 issues are going to be key issues because of this. Because if I'm thinking that way, so is 50,000 other readers.
And that, therefore, it's not going to have the supply and demand balance is not where you're going to need it to be.
Exactly. So I think in a way that's kind of helped me, but I've certainly fallen in love with some titles. Luckily, most of them have panned out and have been good specs. But a lot of times when I'm reading a title, I'm just reading it to and enjoy it. I might buy 5 copies of issue 1, but I'm not like diehard hoarding it. So
we're kind of in the same boat. I will admit we've done a few, especially with Wasatch Con. Every year there's 1 or 2 people at Wasatch Con that we bring in just because we love their work that we know are going to cost us more to bring in than we're going to make off of them, and get hype around them. But we do it because we're fans, and like we did. And I talked about this book on our first episode, but we did the Voracious. We brought in the writer for that, did a cover with him, a Chad Harden cover that was great, and we didn't make our money back on it. We knew we weren't going to from the start, though. I mean, when we had that discussion, we knew that was going to be something that was going to cost us more than we were going to recoup. But and we also paid to have ourselves drawn into their final, story arc, and have fun with that whole thing. But we love the book. We like the guys that make it. We really wanted to get it into more hands. And, ultimately we've sold a whole lot of trades, and we've got a couple people now that bought it and love the fact that we are kind of supporting those kind of obscure things they would never have heard of otherwise that are now regular customers. So, it'll come back around to us on the other side and on the back end.
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, it's about relationship building, because when you do that book, you've shown that writer or that artist that you have faith in their work. And as an LCS or any type of retailer, that means a lot to them. Absolutely. It's like buying original art from an artist. If you're willing to take that time to purchase something that personal or have them do a sketch for you or something like that, it almost builds a small inkling of a relationship. And if it's something you can foster and help grow, it'll only help you down the road, you know?
Oh, certainly. I mean, well, and you have certain guys, like, I think the best example, and you've been in the room with him when he's talked about this stuff, but like Robert Kirkman is one of those guys who, as big as Robert Kirkman is now, and as much as he's doing, every year he does dinners and breakfasts where he pays for dinners and breakfasts for all the retailers. He sits with us, he talks with us, he gives us all kinds of insider info to help us with our purchasing decision. He's done a lot of things like this new Negan book that's coming out that's just to support us financially. And Robert's been very clear that without comic retailers, he would never have gotten where he's at, and he never forgot that. And you see those guys that get to that level and they remember how they got there and they remember who got them there. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, I think you get a feel for guys like that in the industry too. It's like Donnie Cates, first time I talked to him at a convention, you were there, remember? And he just sat there and bullshitted with dropping F-bombs left and right and just bullshitting and fucking
there was no one around
the whole time. I just didn't even care, but the dude was, had just started, I think he just started his Venom run, or was a couple issues into his Venom run, was already being hyped up as Marvel's great next thing, because he had 3 or 4 more books slated to start that year, that he was going to be taking over. And the dude was just, you could tell he was a fanboy at heart, and Kirkman, honestly, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. That second year, last year when we went to Emerald City again, or was it? No, San Diego, right?
I think it was San Diego.
Yeah. Walked up to him and was like, hey, my, last year my wife was upset because I took pictures with you and we hung out for a little bit. And she badgered me because, I didn't like video conference her in or anything like that, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember you from last year. And, started talking a little bit. And then he's like, well, video call your wife right now, so, having a little 5-minute chat with my wife, which she got upset with me afterwards. She's like, you could have told me to put a bra on first, but
yeah, right.
The guy's cool as hell. A lot of them, I think people get starstruck too often with meeting celebrities or athletes or just wealthy, successful individuals or,
or especially with comic creators.
Yeah.
Because I had this conversation actually when we had Kevin Eastman out for our first con, and I had this conversation with Kevin and his wife Courtney, and they both said like, hey, in San Diego where we live, we go to the grocery store like everybody else, and we aren't stopped. Nobody goes, oh look, that's the guy that created Ninja Turtles. When we're at home, we're just at home. We're just one of the guys in the neighborhood, and but when we go to a con, all of a sudden we have all these people fawning over us and losing their minds. So it's kind of that perfect celebrity where you get it when you want it and not when you don't. And it was the same thing with him too. I gave him a ride to the airport after that, and we had to do some running and stuff. So I was with him for a good 30-40 minutes, and Kevin just on and on. He didn't want to talk about Turtles. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to talk Jack Kirby. He wanted to talk Stan Lee. He wanted to talk old school Marvel. I mean, that was his passion, and that's what he was all about. And he sat there for 35 minutes, and you would have thought he was a 10-year-old kid, the way he was going on and on about all the old school Marvel and his comic collection and how he goes out and wants to buy all these old Silver Age books and, which ones he can't afford and all that kind of stuff. And he's just one of us, man. He's there. Most of these guys are just one of us that happen to be on the other side of the table.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing a lot of people forget is like you even look at the pinnacle of some of these artists. You look at like the who's who of these guys that these guys that are selling $30,000 originals or $20,000 originals. There's a reason they got into comics, though. There's a reason 95% of these guys got into comics, and it wasn't money, because there's 95% of them of these guys that get into comics don't make money.
Yeah, well, and they certainly weren't guaranteed. And the big money in art, was never comic books.
Yeah, they get into it because they love it, though, because they're excited at the potential of seeing their work on something that they grew up reading.
Yeah, and I think if you really want to get in with a comic creator too, one of the things people don't realize, if you really want to have a good conversation with them and have them remember and have them really open up to you, don't even always talk. I mean, thank them for what they do, tell them you're a fan, but then ask them what they like. Ask them what they're a fan of. Ask them what their other favorite books of, hey, I read your book. What else would you recommend I read? And you'll see a whole different side of them, and you'll really get the full conversation, and you'll get to know them a whole lot better.
Oh, and they'll get to know you. They remember you. they remember stuff like that. Like, absolutely. I can honestly say last time I ran into Adam Hughes at a convention and went to get something signed from him and his wife remembered me, you know, and it was because 2 conventions before I sat down and had a 15-minute conversation with both of them, you know, not just with him, but with his extremely artistically talented wife, you know.
Yes, she's outstanding. Yeah.
Yeah. And got to talk to them about their favorite writers that they've gotten to work with and what books are they reading, you know, and showed that interest. And because of that, they remembered me. He wasn't even doing any more signings that last day at the con, you know, when I went to get something signed from him, and him and his wife saw me standing across the aisle being told he's not signing anymore. And they were like, "Oh, hey, come on over. How you been?" You know, it's stuff like that. Like those relationships, fostering those and building those into the ability to speculate better is certainly something that's invaluable.
Yeah. I mean, me and Charles, early on in our con going career, ended up talking to Max Brooks for a while, and we ended up talking politics with Max Brooks. But anyone who knows Max Brooks knows that's his real great passion. And after that conversation, almost a year later, we're walking in a con, and again, same thing. We were kind of walking by, waved to him a little bit, like because we could tell he looked up, saw that he recognized, he waved us over, and he started talking about the same, started talking politics with us again, and it was like that conversation never ended. You could tell that's they build those connections just like everybody else does.
Yeah, exactly.
So how'd you guys get connected? I know that you kind of seem to be lucky on the start of that Peach Momoko wave, and kind of get into that early. How did you guys get connected with her, and what led you to that route?
So for that, I definitely have to tip my hat at my business partner. We had, I don't know, I'd been a fan of her work, and as a speculator, you could see what her Ghost Spider cover did. You know, that Ghost Spider cover, I think at the time was starting to tip. God, it was hitting $200 raw or $250 raw. Gradeds were going for $550, you know? So it was one of those things that was kind of, we sat down and had put a wish list together of artists that we looked up to, and writers that we had looked up to. And we're like, okay. And we still have that list. You know, we still go down that list every time we need a new thing.
Sure.
But she was definitely on that list as being an up and coming, artist. Her ratio variants that she'd done with Marvel up to that point, most of them were selling pretty good secondary market, $50-$60. Since then they've blown up, but you could definitely see that there was a wave rising on her work. She was being utilized more and more by the big, by Marvel. I was going to say the big 2, but she hasn't really done DC work. Well, not much. I think she's done 2 books now just recently, but you could see it coming. So at that point, it was just a simple reaching out. My business partner fosters and deals with a lot of those relationships on the artist side. And it's kind of let me handle the business side of things a little bit more, but it was just a simple email and a reach out. Ended up contacting Yo, who's her husband, also her manager. Amazing guy, super friendly. So is Peach. And we got talking to her about a title, and we sold her on it, told her kind of what it was about, everything like that, told her who it was written by, and what work he had previously done. And she was sold on it and super excited to do it. So we locked her in for that. And, the rest is history. That book's been nuts for us.
Yeah, I mean, immediately it jumped on the secondary market, like triple what you guys were pre-selling it for, didn't it?
Yeah, I think right now, pre-sales right now, because that book, mind you, still is not in hand.
Right.
But that was...
That's a whole other story.
Yeah. But I think that book, God, what was it doing recently? $50, $55? Yeah.
And what were you pre-selling that one at?
God, what did we do that? $14.99, I think. We went cheap on that one.
About right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, cool, man. Hey, so we're gonna wrap this up here. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how they can find you, anything you got coming up, anything you want to hype?
Yeah. You can find us at Hive Comics on Facebook or Instagram. That's HIVE Comics. Also, you can check out our website, which is www.hive- the nice little nifty dash in the middle, comics.com. We have, good Lord, we've got so much stuff coming out. We've been working a lot with Garrett Gunn and Frank Gogol over at Source Point Press. Super awesome publisher, super amazing, underrated and undervalued writers. These guys put out winner after winner after winner. But yeah, we've got some no heroin books coming out, Peach Momoko covers for Frank Gogol. And then with Garrett Gunn, we've got his new series, Cold Dead Hands and Warcorns. And then we have a top secret Marvel project coming out in August that we are not allowed to talk about, but everyone's going to lose their minds.
Nice. I don't even think I know about that one.
No, probably not. It's super, super top secret. Familiars is another one that's coming out. That's through Source Point. Stillwater with Image, I think, is one we're still waiting on an email on that one, but that should be coming any day now. Yeah, some amazing covers. TMNT, Last Ronin. We're doing the entire run. We partnered with the Nerd Store with you guys to do the entire run. Have some amazing artists on that. Yeah. But yeah, artwork from Kel New, John Jang, Stan Yak, Peach Momoko, a couple other, top tier talents coming everyone's way. So pretty cool stuff.
And a lot of them, if they can't get them through you, they can check with Nerd Store because we're doing a partnership. I know on at least a lot of them. I don't know all of them, Charles.
And quite a few. Quite a few of them. If we're out of stock, which happens quick, we usually do sell out within 24 hours. But for
the people that listen here, we tend to sell out a little bit slower, so we'll be your secret weapon. Yeah,
exactly. They can always check with us too. Occasionally we'll sell 50 off to another retailer or 100 off to another retailer. So they can always check with us. We have people email us all the time. Hey, can I still get one of these? Like, well, we're out, but you can check these guys out. But yeah, so we try and spread the love amongst other retailers when we can. So
fantastic. Right on. Cool, man. Hey, anything else you wanted to cover that we didn't get on here?
No, I think that's it, man. I just think, if you are a speculator and you're listening to this, just know that there's a responsible way to speculate. There's a way that doesn't give it a bad name or that you don't have to be one of the people that's getting berated in the chat rooms on Facebook. There's a good way and a wrong way, but it definitely starts with educating yourself. And it starts with fostering those relationships with your LCS and letting them know what your goal is. You don't have to be a sneaky speculator. You can walk into your shop and say, "Hey,
well, and don't try to, because we'll see through it. We've seen through everybody. We'll see through you if you're trying to be sneaky, and we'll roll our eyes and we'll do the same thing that we would have otherwise, and probably give you less respect than if you just come up and talk to us.
Just be open about it. It's the greatest thing I can tell you is be open about it with your LCS. I can't tell you how many times that I get calls from the Nerd Store, Black Cat Comics, my 2 LCSs saying, "Hey, dude, I just got 10 long boxes in. Do you want to take a look at them before anybody else?" And that's because I've built those relationships, and because you guys know what my goal is. I'm going to buy, I'm going to sell, and then I'm going to come back to the store and spend more money. And if you can show shops that that's the way that you do it and that's the way you roll, they'll support you 110%.
Well, and we value from your footwork, because you see a lot of this stuff coming. You'll have, when you get a nugget of information, I can say, like the San Diego last year, when you found out about that TMNT cover that you had to pre-order to pick up at IDW's booth. I didn't know about that. I got 2 copies of that simply because you made sure we knew about it.
Yeah, that book is nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, and it went crazy, and I got my own personal one because I'm a TMNT guy, so that made a lot for me. But it goes both ways. If you feed them some of the info, they're going to use their connections for you, and you guys can work together to build each of you stronger for sure.
Well, and you have to share the love too. I think that's the other important thing. I dropped off the owner of Black Cat's become a Peach collector. I've dropped him off covers.
I'm not surprised. That seems right up Greg's alley.
Yeah, and I will continue to drop them off covers. Every Peach book we put out, guess who's getting a copy? The other day I dropped off that Mercy one. Charles helped me send off a bunch to CGC for grading. I got a 9.6 back. I left it there on the counter for Charles, and he goes, "Hey, you're forgetting a book." And I said, "No, that's your book." Sharon, letting you know when I find out about turtle stuff, because I know you've got love for turtles or anything X23. Doing that. I mean, you have to. If you're taking, you have to be able to give too.
For sure. For sure. Yep. I agree entirely. All right. Well, hey man, thanks for coming on. Hopefully it was worth it for you. Hope you had a good time.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It was a lot of fun.
This show is part of the Geek Nerd Network. Find more shows like it at geeknerdnetwork.com. This is Janet.
At Push My Buttons Podcast, you can get all the gaming news, as well as information on latest releases and game reviews. You can also watch us play some of your favorite games, everything from Sonic the Hedgehog to God of War, on YouTube and Twitch. Follow us on all the social media and listen on all of your favorite apps. Just search for Push My Buttons Podcast.